Welcome, everybody. This is a truly multi-stakeholder panel, as you can see, assembled here to discuss internet economy. And if I may say, it is, I think, the first gender-equal panel ever since CyFy opened last evening. In fact, Rajat asked me, is this the panel? I said, yeah, we decided to let a few men in. So on that note, I'll start our discussions today. The format which we are going to follow is we really have representation from all the constituent groups which are part of the multi-stakeholder design. So I'm going to invite our eminent panelists to give a few opening remarks, which will pivot around a few themes, which is, as you would have seen in the conference papers, we're going to discuss about how do we, particularly in Asia, address the barriers to internet economy, particularly affordable connectivity and universal access at one level. And second, look at what are the levers for promoting economic growth and integrating internet economy as a part of that economic growth design in all these countries. And there are a whole lot of policy considerations and best practices which exist, which I think everybody will benefit hearing from. So with that, I wanted to turn to Angela, who is visiting here from the United States and is representing the NTIA. Angela, your first comments and your thoughts, please.
Thank you very much. Again, I'm Angela Simpson, Deputy Assistant Secretary of NTIA in the Department of Commerce in the US government. I know, or I'm guessing at least, that a lot of people here, when you think of NTIA, you probably think of IANA, right? But what I wanted to do actually in the context of connectivity and digital empowerment is I wanted to take a minute and right now, instead of talking about IANA, to talk about some of the other work that NTIA does with regard to connectivity. And again, most of it is domestic within the US, and where the facts are not exactly the same between countries like the US and countries like India. I think that there are some tactics and strategies that are very relevant in both circumstances, and so I would like to share some of our best practices and learnings that might be correlating to what people in this region are trying to do and achieve in terms of connectivity and digital empowerment and growing the digital economy. So first, I just wanted to mention that we at NTIA have also used programs like grants to help fund infrastructure, which obviously is a very key aspect of connectivity and digital economy. And to the extent governments can be involved in that aspect of increasing access to broadband, I think that that's a very important and a very powerful thing. But I would also just emphasize the importance of localities and the importance of communities. And similar to what is happening in India, I think we are also focusing on communities in the same way in the United States, offering communities the tools that they need to decide what is most important to them in the digital economy and what is the most effective ways to get their people connected. And a part of this is benchmarking against each other, helping states and communities understand what is working and what's not working, but also respecting the various the differences in local areas and understanding that local is very key to getting connectivity and getting adoption. Also the concept of public-private partnerships, getting all of the various interested parties involved in the efforts to increase connectivity and to spur the digital economy and digital empowerment is very important. And then also the concept of digital literacy. It's one thing to have the access to internet. It's another thing to have people fully empowered and fully skilled to use it. So part of that is can relate to content. Part of it can relate to just having people understand why it's important to them. And I think it was very powerful, the keynote last night from Minister Prasad about getting localities involved and localities and people socialized to the internet and how to use it. One of the things that NTI does that I think is important to know is collect information. And the importance of information from people when you're trying to connect and empower is a very important thing to have. So for instance, Minister Prasad yesterday talked about kind of the life cycle of internet adoption in India, kind of going from having observation of what is available and then adopting and then enjoying and then empowering. And I think that that's a powerful life cycle into digital empowerment to people. In the US, it's a little bit different, but the importance of information in targeting the policies is very important. For instance, we every year, or almost every year, try to take very good care to question people in the context of like a census type surveys to people to identify things like, are you using internet? Okay, if you're using internet, how are you using it? When are you using it? Why are you using it? If you're not, likewise, why are you not? And I think that here we have a little bit of divergence about why people may not. In the US, it's largely not a case of not having some kind of access, but we're hearing things of people not really saying that they're not adopting because of the lack of any opportunity to adopt, but it's more of a situation of people feeling like they don't know why it's important for them or they don't really care to. And I think that one of the things that people can learn is something like the concepts of digital India that we hear and have heard about. If you have one source of getting a lot of government services, that's a very powerful mechanism to adopt internet. So that's something that people can consider when they're thinking about that. So we have a little bit of different motivators to connectivity and empowerment, but I think my main point is the collection and the analysis of information to find out really what the situation is, and then tailoring policies based upon that information is a very important thing to have and to do.
Thank you, Angela. One thing I think everybody's seen this because it's in the papers today is that India jumped up 16 points in the World Economic Forum's competitiveness ranking. And in the recitals which have come up describing the reasons why that happened is because of very high scores which India received on grounds of innovation. And also there has been huge amount of efficiency with regard to goods and services as such, where, of course, we all know this, the digital economy has played a very important role, because you cannot have efficiency in goods and services without digital economy being mainstream. So our sector has really been foundational in terms of making sure that we secure such a huge double-digit jump. I want to turn to you, Chandan, because you all are really doing a whole lot of work in terms of the Digital India vision, and also sort of we are seeing various national governments in Asia coming up with their national digital strategies. So what are your opening thoughts and your opening comments on this Internet Economy panel theme?
Thanks, Anki, and good morning to all of you. In order to have a robust internet economy, and in order to have a digital enablement, I think there are three important areas which needs to be addressed. One is connecting the unconnected. Second is quality of service or speed of broadband, and third is addressing the requirement of modern users or generation Y. So when we say connecting the unconnected, so I'll just quote some data points. In India currently, 90% of the population has mobile coverage, and more than 80% has 3G coverage. So there has been impressive progress as far as mobile coverage is concerned. But in India, 70% of the people live in the villages, and as of January 2016, nearly 9% of the villages were totally unconnected. They were not having any kind of mobile coverage. So I think that is the one area which needs to be addressed, so connecting the unconnected. A second area which needs to be focused is speed of the broadband. We have seen several programs on filling the digital divide gaps. So there has been good progress on that. But what we have observed is, though the digital divide is narrowing, but the digital divide is now more deepened. When I say the deepen means the people who have connectivity on narrowband and the people who are having connectivity on the broadband, there is a now more digital divide amongst those people. So there needs to be focus on having the speedier broadband and improve the quality of broadband. We can represent this from another data point, like if we compare India with the mature markets. Say for example, in US, the average broadband speed is 70 Mbps, and the broadband economy contribution to US GDP is around, US is 30 Mbps, and their contribution to their GDP is around 4.9 or around 5%. Say Korea, their the average broadband speed is 70 Mbps, and their digital economy or internet economy or broadband economy contribution to their GDP is around 11%. While in India, the average broadband speed is 2 Mbps. So the contribution of the broadband in India's GDP is also very low, which is around 2.3%. So we need to focus on improving the quality of the broadband also. And third point which I mentioned was about the addressing the needs of the modern user. So the modern user or generation Y doesn't need just a telecom service. They need ICT services, and we define that with the term we call it roads. This 5-letter word, roads, ROADS, defines a modern user's requirement from the digital networks. R stands for real time, O stands for all online, on demand, A stands for all online, D stands for do it yourself, and S stands for social. So a modern user or generation Y needs real time, on demand, all online, do it yourself, and social. So that is the service which a modern user requires. So in order to address these challenges, I think there's a requirement that the service providers needs to transform their network. End-to-end network transformation is required, from the access to the aggregation network to the core network. So those are some of the thoughts which I thought I would be sharing.
Thank you. Kaja, you are the cybersecurity strategist at Microsoft, and with the growth of the internet economy, I think one of the fundamental factors are what kind of cybersecurity policies which governments should pursue, and what kind of cybersecurity practices which firms and participants in the internet economy should adopt and practice. What are your opening comments from a cybersecurity perspective in terms of the growth of internet economy, the way you see it, given your global experience?
Sure. I think that works. I think in terms of, I think it would be important to sort of take some of the conversations that we're having now and sort of make it slightly more concrete even. I think, a lot of people don't realize the opportunity and also the transformation that will happen because countries such as India or Bangladesh are sort of slowly coming online. I think if you look at the numbers, so I'm Slovenian, and Slovenia is 2 million people, right? And it's 2 million people who are like 99% are already online. And IT is sort of maybe not the most important thing to our economy, but like it's a substantial contribution. And if you look at the next 10 years, there'll be 700 million people coming online in India. That will bring with it complete transformation, not just for people here, but in terms of what services will be developed, what products will be developed. Because I think a lot of what we have at the moment is very focused on people like me that sort of live in the US or people in Germany. I think how these new technologies, and I think Microsoft sort of is betting that a lot of them will be built on cloud, partly because of the scale it enables and partly because of just the unprecedented capacity that cloud has to analyze data and drive new services, will will really sort of set the role for sort of the world as it develops. And I think we're going to talk about IoT in a second, but I think even sort of outside that sort of slightly challenging space, if we're thinking about, our team did a sort of a set of research a couple years back that looked at how countries deal when they come online at what levels. And it's clear that sort of as people first come online, sort of cybercrime spikes dramatically. And there is a need for governments and private sector to work together, whether it's on education policies, on sort of driving standards that new companies can adopt to, or using technologies such as cloud to sort of, that oftentimes have a fundamentally secure baseline to sort of build services on top of them to make sure that citizens know and are aware of sort of what are the safe choices to be making when they're sort of going online. I think and sort of to give an example, I think the thing that struck me particularly was, we often talk at Microsoft about sort of, we're working with Schneider Electric or like Boeing and sort of big companies that help them drive productivity and things like that. But I think examples, like very real examples of here where university uses the sort of cloud computing to make information about how to grow product to farmers in like local vernaculars, sort of not even languages that are necessarily written anywhere, and they're able to do it because cloud is so cheap, and they are close to the communities and enable those farmers to sort of increase their products. I think those are the not even just the innovations, but the opportunities that technology will enable here and across sort of the developing market. And I think it's important that India going forward sort of takes the experience that it has, given that it's so forward in IT space, and sort of works with other governments to bring them on board with them.
Thank you. We'll come back I have some follow-up questions, but we'll come back to that. Nazneen, turning to you, Bangladesh, your regulator BTRC recently released some numbers. There are 64 million internet users in Bangladesh. So obviously, the number of people who are now connected to the internet is growing. What has been your very practical experience in terms of running Grameen's work, in terms of bringing more and more Bangladeshis and using the internet as a tool and using that as part of your work with grassroots producers, and also in terms of various education initiatives that Grameen runs?
Thank you and good morning. I'm representing the Grameen. So in the digital economy, I find three things is very necessary and essential element. One is the connecting people to the world and the internet, and another is digitizing the all services and every sector, and the services provided by the government, that also should be digitized. And another is investing time and money into the development of the skills of the digital skills. So three things I see very important for this digital economy. And as the internet is the information infrastructure, and it directly relates to the economy. So I just say some few words, what we are doing, what we are investing into the digital world. So Grameen actually took a huge initiative when in the very first time in late 90s to establishing a company, Grameen Telecom for the mobile phone development in the rural area for the unreached people. And they are the shareholder of the Grameen Phone, and Grameen Phone is a huge telecom company, and they already 50 million, create a user in the 50 million in the Bangladesh. So it's a huge to connect the people around the world. And this is the main, actually, and other 4 operators also working in Bangladesh. So right this moment, the internet and the broadband issue or others, it's depend on the mobile operator. And another is digitizing the contents and everything. And our company and Grameen, others company, technical company, Grameen Solutions, they contribute huge in the education sector. And we working, my company is the Grameen Communications, we working for the digitize the microfinance financial services. And now Grameen Bank and more than 100 MFIs are working in our systems, and they use our systems and do this. And more financial services are coming up, but we need to tap all the things financial from the financial organization. I want to mention one thing, is that now Grameen's focus in the social business. Social business is not very strong things. It's like a traditional business, but the investor cannot take money back, dividend in their own. But it's running with the traditional laws and rules. So in this case, when we started the focusing on the social business, we actually, there is a Naveen Udyokta program, and it is called the New Entrepreneur. In English, it is a New Entrepreneur program. So what we are doing, we develop a system before that. The investors actually teach the new entrepreneurs how they digitally do the business. If they're willing to do business, then they invest the money, and they started with a partnership model. And during these, the investors teach them, guide them, to monitor them to do this. And we develop a system for that, so they can use their data, they can send their data through apps to the system, and so the investors and they also monitor their business. So, but that way, we are digitizing the whole community, and we contributed in this way.
Thank you, Nazin. I think it's interesting to note, and I think there are follow-up questions which I want to get back to you, but this entire thing of how do you take connectivity and turn that into entrepreneurship development is a very interesting concept.
Actually transforming the, say, unemployment people to the entrepreneurship.
Yes. Yeah.
Our slogan is, we are not the job seekers, we are the job givers. So new entrepreneurs now giving them the jobs. And small startups are growing up, and maximum is doing is a digital, say, mobile workshop, apps loading, OS downloading. These are the activities they are doing in their business.
So coming to you, Rajat, having heard the entire panel, you are the only research don on the panel. As you see all of this playing out, particularly in the context of Asia, and more immediately in the context of South Asia, what do you see are the real opportunities, and what do you think is the roadmap between now and 2020 in terms of the opportunity statement of the internet economy in this region?
Thanks, Anki. Before I take my 4 minutes, let me say how delighted I am to be a part of this panel for a couple of reasons. One, thank you, Samir, for inviting me. Thank you, RF, and all the partner institutions. Thank you, Anki, for kind of allowing me to speak as well, and to be a part of this, I think, distinguished panel. And the reason I'm delighted to be on this panel is because of 2 reasons, as I said. One, there's research from the IMF that shows that if there's gender balance in the workforce for India, India's GDP will be 27% higher. And for India, that's fairly large, because we're kind of a lot of gender balance in the workforce. But for even countries like Japan and United States. And the second reason I'm delighted to be a part of this panel is because ICRIER, the organization that I belong to, is 70% women. And I would think that we do very good work, and we've done a lot of work on the internet space. And I'll take a couple of minutes to describing the work that we've been doing since 2008, responding to Anki's question about the kind of internet and connectivity multipliers to the GDP for India in particular, and applicable to entire South Asia. So when we started liberalizing our telecom sector, I mean, the connectivity was abysmal. It was really bad all over South Asia, except Sri Lanka. Connectivity was very bad. And this is the late 90s. And then when we began to liberalize, connectivity kind of increased by leaps and bounds, because both of technology and liberalization, because of kind of the new models of reform and independent regulation came in. And we added at one point in 2000 more connections in India in 1 month than we had added since independence to the 90s. So that was the kind of nature of the revolution of connectivity that happened. Of course, I mean, that connectivity was mobile voice connectivity, and we estimated that if there was a 10% increase in mobile connectivity in India in 2008, we would get a bang on GDP of about 1.5% in the rate of growth of GDP across Indian states, which meant that if a Bihar added 10% more connections, its GDP would grow at 1.5% greater than it had grown without digital connectivity. And that was the way to interpret those results. And then we decided in last year, and I'm carrying a copy of that report, in fact, earlier this year, we said, why don't we replicate that study for internet? And the reason we thought that was important, not only internet, but broadband. And the reason we thought it was important, because now internet is a fact of every transaction. Almost every transaction is intermediated on the internet. And I don't need to give you examples, taxi services, hotel services, all kinds of e-commerce transactions. And I'll talk a little bit about the productivity paradox a little later if I have time. But the productivity enhancement that the internet allows is substantially higher than the kind of productivity enhancement of simple voice connectivity through mobile, which was important in countries like India and South Asia because they were unconnected. But I think adding another layer of broadband connectivity, enabling productivity enhancements that were possible as a result of the internet. If you're an economist, the first thing you think about market failure and asymmetric information. Well, internet comes along, or even mobile internet comes along and alleviates that asymmetric information. Now you're not so much worried about buying a used car to be a lemon. I mean, I'm going back to the seminal article that was done in the 80s about market failure by George Akerlof. And now the vehicular, health of the vehicle and the accidents that is involved in or not, because you have digitized information about the vehicle. That will also soon come to India. But it alleviates that asymmetric information, and you can multiply these examples, across every transactions that happens in the country. So what we thought earlier this year was that internet could give you a bigger bang on GDP simply because it enabled a lot more efficiency into the system. And this was not something new. World Bank and other countries had already done research which showed that the impact on GDP, the multiplier impact of GDP, was higher, and there was a hierarchy of impacts, which meant that internet broadband impacts were greater than simply internet impacts, were greater than mobile impact, and the last was the poor fixed line vanilla pot service, as we used to call it. So there was a hierarchy. Broadband gave you the biggest bang for the buck, followed by internet, then mobile, and then fixed line. And that hierarchy of impacts, and it's easy to see intuitively why you'd get the hierarchy of impacts, is because the internet ecosystem enables not just connectivity, but it enables you information, transactions. It makes it much more efficient in terms of consummating transactions, and the emergence of new business models that are replacing the old business models is just one example, and I've given you example, taxi services, etc., all those examples. So what was the number, the magic number for India that we came up with? And I dare say this is going to increase. What we found that across Indian states, if there was a 10% increase in broadband connectivity, then there would be a bang on the rate of growth of GDP of 2.4%. And I think this can be even higher because of all the reasons that Chandan has mentioned in his comments, that there are a lot of underserved people in India, unconnected people in India. Broadband connectivity in India is there, but it's kind of, there's a digital divide there. Rural areas remain unconnected. The agricultural services that one spoke about, that could kind of come into the net, and all kinds of innovations are happening in agriculture that you'd quite be surprised to know that connectivity can tell you per square inch of soil nutritional requirement, so that you can customize. We know that mass customization is possible in the internet, but mass customization in terms of what the soil requires, what you can produce, etc., is possible because connectivity allows you to kind of collect the data of health of the soil, nutrients requirements, and the crop that you're going to plant, and feed it back to you so that you can be very efficient and very targeted at what you're doing in terms of fertilizer use in the soil. So, there are huge impacts. So, of course, there's a dark side of technology. I mean, there's nothing that, as economists say, there's always a trade-off. There's a dark side. But that doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, internet is there and it's there to stay.
Thank you, Rajat. Angela, we heard a lot about, I think, types of innovations which we don't even know today, which will surface. Because increasing proliferation, what it is doing is that it's unlocking initiative, and it's unlocking creativity and human potential. What do you think are the pro-innovation policies which governments should pursue, which will allow for experimentation and also fuel this kind of risk-taking and pro-innovation-led growth in different countries?
Thank you, Anki. In this regard, I would say a couple of things. I think encouraging policy flexibility and pro-innovation policies is a key thing, and I think a key element of that is, and here I'll mention the multi-stakeholder process and how increasing multi-stakeholder collaborations domestically and internationally can very much help spur pro-innovation policies. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, in a multi-stakeholder environment, you have broader perspectives, and the broader perspectives can lend to better policies being adopted. And a second thing that is a good characteristic of using multi-stakeholder processes to create pro-innovation policies is the timeframes that can be associated with reaching the conclusion. So when you're talking about international fora and the cadence of those meetings internationally, or when you're thinking domestically, for instance, in the United States, the timeframes for regulators to act, or the timeframes that can be associated with enacting legislation that would be pro-innovation and related to the digital economy. Oftentimes, if you can rely on multi-stakeholder processes, you can get results much faster and much more flexible than you could otherwise. And I think that the issue of flexibility is key when you talk about pro-innovation policies, especially in new areas, things like Internet of Things, things like 5G, wireless. The ability to be flexible and encourage innovation instead of unintentional consequence of stifling innovation for some reason that you either didn't think of at the time or have to try to revise later, can be harmful to local economies and can be harmful to countries in regard to other countries and how they're trying to compete globally. When thinking about the pro-innovation aspect of policies, I think a key substance aspect is trust. The issue of trust being a key driver of adoption of the new technology is something that cannot be underemphasized. And then when trust leading to adoption, I think it's especially key when we talk about things here like cybersecurity policies as a means to improve trust, and privacy policies as a means to increase trust and adoption in new technology. I think another aspect people should consider when talking about adopting pro-innovation policies anywhere is also considering the flexibility of thinking about whether to build something from scratch or to evolve an existing policy. And sometimes it is better, faster, to evolve policies rather than to consider them from the ground up. And just a couple of examples I would cite in the United States context has been our universal service programs to help increase connectivity. So there's been a lot of work over the last several years to evolve those programs that we already have in place to better reflect a digital economy and a digital environment. For instance, trying to leverage the E-rate aspect of universal service, which is trying to connect schools and libraries to broadband as a means to encourage greater capacity and greater broadband deployment. And then also things like Lifeline, which is a subsidy program that was traditionally left to help low-income populations get access to telephones, but now it's evolved a couple of times to expand to wireless and now to broadband. So sometimes leveraging kind of the foundation of other programs to adapt to new technologies and innovations can be very effective.
So building on that theme of universal access which you talked about, Angela, one question, Chandan, which I had for you, because I think this is becoming a very active discussion point in India and of course in South Asia also broadly. This notion of spectrum scarcity, of course in India is no longer a problem, but it's notionally, it was for a long time. What is your view in terms of sharing of connectivity infrastructure as a way to addressing affordable connectivity solutions and then deployment of huge accelerated growth of the app economy on top of that? It would be good to hear you as an operator, what would you feel, what's your view in terms of sharing of infrastructure?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I'll just share one data point. As of today, in India, on an average, operator has around 18 megahertz of spectrum, wherein the global average is more than 50 megahertz. So of course the spectrum scarcity is there. And India has unique features like in some of the urban areas, India has highest population density. So we know that the kind of spectrum which is there, which is available, which is identified by IMT for the mobile services that cannot meet the requirement of the masses. So we need to have a mix of the technologies, and of course spectrum sharing, infrastructure sharing is one of the point. But at the same time, like if you look at India's broadband, currently broadband penetration is around say 14%, and most of it is on the mobile cellular networks. So there's a unbalanced growth when we compare the fixed broadband and the mobile broadband. Fixed broadband penetration in India is just 2%. So there is a need of the hour that fixed broadband also now needs to be needs to be strengthened, and we need to have more and more fixed broadband penetration. Say in India, currently, if you look at the cellular networks, there are around 490,000 cell sites. And out of these 490, only 20% of the cell sites are connected through optical fiber. Rest, all of them are backhauled through microwave, And in microwave, the bandwidth maximum which microwave can carry is around 300 Mbps or 350, Mbps. Now we're talking about 4.5G, like Angela mentioned about 5G. If we have to adopt 5G, then the dependency on microwave, we need to reduce. We need to fiberize the cell sites. We need to, have the fiber. We need to increase the fiber penetration, because 5G is the technology which will really help in, internet economy. Because 5G is being developed keeping in mind that cellular technology will not just be limited for voice and data. This cellular technology will be adopted in the cross industry, in the verticals, and that will really bring the value, and that will really enhance the internet economy. So fiberization is must. I think we need to strengthen that part, and there needs to be a focus on that. Second point is there are there's a copper lines already available, and operators want to reuse it. So there is a innovation happen on the on the DSLAM, which can provide broadband using copper. So the operators need to adopt the latest technologies. We have vectoring, G.fast. Using these technologies, the existing copper can also be used to provide 100 Mbps kind of bandwidth, or even 500 Mbps kind of bandwidth can also be provided. And currently in India, most of the copper is held by the public operators. So maybe a regulator, government can come up with a policy of copper unbundling. So that can be, the operators can share that copper, and they can also provide the broadband connectivity on using the shared resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Staying with the barriers to growth theme, Nazneen, one of the barriers is also lack of availability of local language content. And it would be interesting to understand, given Bangladesh's growth, there has been also a lot of local language content development which has happened in your country. And a lot of first-time users are Bangla-speaking users who created content on the internet in Bangla. So tell us what has been the experience of the developer community in Bangladesh in terms of creating local language applications and services. And what are the lessons which others and other countries who are also multilingual and have local language dependencies can learn from you all?
Okay. Actually, for the local language in our country, many initiatives, and it is growing very fast. But one thing is, it is very scattered. Government already took initiative, and they have done many websites and many Bangla content available in the web. But in the deployment side, so what is necessary is, for the deployment, there are other initiative need to take, and for the village grassroots level. But still in the grassroots level, there is a lot of problems still. And Mr. Rajat also mentioning that it depends on mainly the mobile network. So connectivity is one of the smooth connectivity, and available connectivity is one of the major problem to see the local language and webs. And another thing is, still we are facing problems with the no OS still in Bangla language. So it is one problem. And scatteredly, some civil society, some networking people, networking community, technical community, they are trying to do this, and our government also took much initiative. But in the development of the content, it is okay, but for the using of the content and people who are in the grassroots level, there is a still problem remains.
Yeah, I think this is one of the sort of continuing work in progress which the entire sector has to deal with, and in many countries we see this coming up. We were talking about IoT before the panel started, and that is the new buzzword in a way. There was a McKinsey study in 2015 which said that IoT as a sector till 2025 is capable of generating an economic value of $11.1 trillion for the world. So obviously it's a huge, huge opportunity statement which will have multiple participants. It will also create an environment of huge number of connected devices. 37 billion is what Cisco estimates by 2020. And therefore, in that environment, what becomes the, sort of the challenge of cybersecurity to address some of these issues which you touched upon in your opening remarks at scale? What are the at-scale solution when we look at an IoT environment?
Yeah, I think that's one of those questions without like a proper answer, I feel. It is, like you say, it is a new buzzword, but in reality, IoT devices are already online. It's whether you look at wearable devices, whether you look at computers or sort of pumping devices, things in hospitals, whether you look at cars, there's a lot of connectivity already going on, and without much consideration to security so far. I think we think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I think Microsoft has published a few papers and have worked quite a lot with the broader sort of IoT community to make sure that some of the lessons that sort of we in particular, but the IT industry more broadly, have learned over the past 15 years, because if you look back, you know, the sort of like 2000 era, technology is so much more secure today than it was then, right? So looking at some of the lessons of how do you develop secure products, how do you develop secure software from in a box, I think trying to share that with as broader community as possible, I think is something that industry and government and civil society in reality need to partner with on. But at the same time, it's also important to acknowledge that this is it's an emerging market, right? And it's not one market, it's lots of different companies competing for different segments. And for a lot of them are tiny little companies, and for them, it's really important to be the first to market. And if they have to think about security, they would probably have to hire an engineer, because a lot of the products out there, they have just a tiny little bit of software on them. Most of them, so we are often like, always patch. Make sure that you can patch when something goes wrong, right? I think most of the devices today don't have this ability sort of embedded in them. But if they don't go to market first, they might never succeed as a company. So that additional cost is something that I think most of them at the moment are not ready to adopt. When it goes to like a larger scale, I think we're seeing cars doing, like auto manufacturing doing a lot more in this space. So they're large established companies. It's sort of a different game. But I think sort of the sharing of lessons, the focus on baseline standards, particularly across borders, not sort of in a particular country environment, because the solutions will be emerging that are cross borders, I think is something that's really important. I think the other point that I kind of wanted to make about the innovation policies, with regard to sort of IoT small businesses, but also more broadly, I think one thing that governments really need to look at in the internet economy is to look at how they can make sure that their own small businesses can actually sell across borders, and that they're not sort of just, that they are actually able to compete with some of the bigger players. And the sort of data, the fact that data can flow, the fact that they are able to sell from India to Bangladesh or from India to US or vice versa, and without like barriers, I think are things that are super important for governments to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rajat, on a closing note, two things which I wanted to get your inputs on. We have seen this entire sort of explosion of another phenomena, which is the sharing economy, right? And you talked a lot about the taxi app services. I think it's also led to behavioral changes, which are very interesting, should be interesting to you as a researcher, because increasingly we are seeing these behaviors, particularly among the millennials, that they will go asset light personally. So they're not necessarily going to buy 2 cars or 3 cars. They're just going to use Uber or other Ola or other taxi services, right? So given that is the transformation in terms of consumption habits also which is happening, do you think that the internet economy is going to, of course, change the way economic development happens, but also impact society in terms on the behavioral side?
No question about it. I think it's already begun to happen, and I think the transformational impacts of the internet economy are going to be felt much more in countries like India in terms of emerging markets. And the reason I say that is, suddenly you've got access to infrastructure technology, which through other means were available in developed markets, but in India and emerging markets, it's for the first time such infrastructure is beginning to be available. So I think it'll be both transformative and also impactful. But as I said, there'll also be a kind of a negative side or a dark side to technology. And I'm not talking about financial frauds, and I'm not talking about cyber terrorism. I'm not talking about the good supply chain that terrorist organizations have. I mean, that, of course, is an issue of concern. But I'm simply talking about jobs. I'm talking about inequality. I'm talking about wages. I mean, that's the dark side of the technology that countries, labor-abundant countries like India will have to live with. And in a sense, also, there are measurement problems. I mean, to just give you an example, to belabor this point, sorry, is 80 billion films were sold in 2000, and in 2015, the films, I'm talking about camera films, you had 1.5 trillion films or shots. You can't call them films anymore, but camera shots were sold. Were not sold, were available online or on digital cameras, and the value had dropped 20 times. And GDP is what? The market value of transacted services, but these are not being transacted in the market. They're available in families, transacted free, which means the value of the GDP has fallen because of the introduction of your camera on the mobile phone. It's enhanced productivity 15, 20 times, but your value of the GDP has fallen. And similarly for GPS, and there are several other. And not only have we not been able to capture this productivity increase in GDP statistics, we also haven't been able to capture the kind of enhanced value that it gives to citizens and society. Which means, the point I'm making is that inequality and as well as kind of robotization of jobs is going to be a big concern for countries like India, and we'll have to deal with that. As I said in the beginning, you can't shun technology. Technology will happen one way or the other. And the other point, based on your question about behavioral change, it's actually good that this sharing economy is emerging in India because of the huge resource intensive. I don't want to really talk too much about climate change and urbanization, but it does, technology enables us to kind of not take the resource intensive development path that developed countries have taken and to try and correct, adapt corrective measures or incentivize those corrective measures through examples like the sharing economy. And so that not all of us have to buy cars. And it'll have an impact on your infrastructure, on congestion, and of course, also on emissions. And given that India is perhaps, second to Bangladesh, one of the most dense countries in the world, and the levels of urbanization are scary, are intimidating for, kind of public service delivery needs of India. And technology could come to be a savior and could provide us some succor.
On that optimistic note, we have roughly about 7 minutes. I'll open it up for audience Q&A. We have time, I think, for about 3 questions. Please identify yourself and who you're directing the question to. Gentleman there.
Hello, everybody. Hello, panel. My question goes right up to you, the chair. This is because we've come across the theme, the universal digital access, right? So this is something which is very important in today's sort of setup. But what we see, we've recently witnessed last year that we came across organizations like internet.org, which is, I mean, we know it all, what it constitutes or what philosophy is all about. Like, unless and until we sort of manage this inclusivity and accessibility, it's a paradox. Unless we are really in a position to deal with this such paradox, will we ever be able to really reach the success levels that we aspire in the near future to bring the internet, digital access to the entire, not so sort of what we call who do not have access. So basically, in India, we have seen telecom companies entering in, shaking hands with, big organizations, and Facebook happens to be one of them, which are actually restricting data flow. It's rather monitoring the data. It's acting as the gatekeeper of the data, what we access. So will such methodology really be successful in bringing universal digital access? That's my question.
So first of all, I mean, I did not put myself up for a question, but since you've asked that question, I'll respond to that. And I do not want this to become a free basics discussion, but since you've raised it, I'll try and be short because I want to make sure that there are other questions which other panelists answer. First of all, there is a more granular discussion around differential pricing and free data. Internet.org has various components to it. It's our connectivity strategy. There is work which is happening in our connectivity labs, which includes things like the solar-powered planes, etc., to connect the unconnected. There is this need. The construction of Internet.org was based on in terms of addressing three principal pivots: affordability, free basics response to affordability and relevance. Data is not intuitive like voice. When you come online, what do you do? So it's basically like a sampler in terms of an on-ramp to the full internet. Internet.org was never restrictive. It is not restrictive at all. And when I say Internet.org specifically, I mean free basics. It's a platform which is open, any developer can join. It is open to all telecom partners, whoever wants to offer it. And any application developer can develop on this. The APIs are open, it's in the public domain. That said, there was a discussion, regulatory discussion in India, which went through various open consultative processes. And we understand the TRAI is still to come out with a final position on differential pricing. For the time being, that particular program is shut down in India. But I want to tell you that the program is working very actively in 42 countries, and it is thriving. There are multiple operators who are offering that program, which shows that it is not restrictive. In Bangladesh itself, there are 2 operators who are operating that program. And like I said, I do not want this to become a free basics and a Facebook panel. If you want to ask Facebook questions, please come to Facebook branded events. I'll be happy to answer all your questions. So I want to move on to my next question, please. Anybody?
Hello, ma'am. I'm Anurag from USA. There are certain things which I would like to correlate. One is the spectrum auctions. We see it taking place, huge costs. Second, Reliance Jio. Again, a very disruptive sort of a tariff. So the costs are going up, but the tariffs are coming down. Millions of people joining the internet. We've heard it since yesterday. But these millions who are joining, they are buying handsets which are maybe $70 or less. They're not buying iPhones, and they're buying recharge coupons of 20 rupees or so. That's about 15, 20 cents. So my question, correlating all these, who's paying for this internet economy? What is the economics of this internet economy?
I guess, Rajat, you're best placed to take that question, since the question was not directed at anybody.
Yeah, I mean, there's a demand side and there's a supply side. And there's intense competition on the supply side, notwithstanding scarcity of spectrum and the huge costs of spectrum, because spectrum auctions in India have traditionally fetched high prices because of the scarcity and because of the multiple operators that kind of exist across circles in India. For those of you who are not aware, Delhi is a circle, Bihar is a circle, Maharashtra is a separate circle, and there are about up to 11 operators. I'm sure there's going to be consolidation in the market, so on the supply side, I'm not saying competition, because competition is not only a reflection of the number of operators, but it's also the kind of nature of the competition. But I think there will be some consolidation in the market, so there'll be some scale that will emerge, and therefore on the cost side, there should be some reduction. On the demand side, I think, as you rightly pointed out, I think the tenor of the question rightly suggests that, it's not so much niche and, high-priced services that are going to provide, good bottom lines for the operators, but it's going to be, high-volume, low-margin kind of services. And internet is soon going to become commoditized. Voice has become commoditized, and internet will also become commoditized. Of course, there will be, video conferencing and all that will also exist. But there's competition on the supply side. This consolidation, economies of scale will make the costs try and come down. And on the demand side, you'll drive volumes. And of course, I mean, there is no protection for incumbents in the sense that if you're not doing well, I mean, just like there were barriers to entry in India's market, there are some barriers to exit in that you can't just shut down and go away, but you can obviously get merged with somebody else. So there are mergers possible, and that I think consolidation will happen in the Indian market. But it's a market, you know.
And a functioning market.
It's a
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you can't ask for regulation because there's no market
Absolutely,
failure.
absolutely.
So we have one last person here. And your question, please.
All right, I'm Rohit. I represent a consumer organization that goes by the name Cuts International. We have been pretty active on the consultations that you have been talking about. But my question goes to Mr. Kumar. We talk about digital inclusion, and so there is a possibility the optic fiber, the network that will come with its own time. It won't happen overnight. However, there is a role to be played by local cable operators in providing these services as well. This is my first question. However, there are policy and regulatory changes that would be required in order to achieve this thing. There are certain complications which you would like to take us through. My second question, which is also a part of this thing, will be targeted towards Ms. Sultana, on how Bangladesh is dealing with this thing, last mile or the near last mile connectivity of the services, because I think both the nations are struggling with the same problem. So you would have a bit to explain how Bangladesh is dealing with this thing. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I think I agree with you that in order to have inclusive internet growth, the local LCOs will play a very important role. And like Huawei as a technology provider, we have done a lot of investment on that. We now like using your copper, the cables, the technology called DOCSIS, using that, broadband can be provided. So of course, like the local LCOs or the cable operator can become a micro ISPs, and they will play a very important role. In addition to that, like Government of India has recently, released the policy for MVNOs. So MVNOs can also become a micro ISPs, and they can also like will play a very important role for the inclusive internet growth. So I think local LCOs and MVNO will have to play a larger role in inclusive growth of the internet.
So thank you. I received a request from Samir Saran, and I cannot dispute with the organizers' marching rights to ask a question.
My question is very simple, and to both the ladies. Angela, there is also a degree of monopolization of the whole domain name process itself. And as you're internationalizing the INR functions, how do you ensure that that virtual grip of one operator over the TLDs and the process of the assignment of names and the auction processes, how are you internationalizing that? So that's my first question. And the second is to Ms. Sieglitsch. If you were asked to name 2 things India needs to do to become the cloud hub of the world, if we need to be the place which hosts the cloud services, what would those 2 things be in terms of policy?
I guess just very quickly on the ICANN question and the GTLDs. I mean, from my perspective, it is very globalized right now in terms of the multi-stakeholder process that's used both to create the policies and also the functions and the community powers to enforce them and make sure that they are in place. I mean, I think that we've seen over the last 2 years the success of the community and all the stakeholders in the process. So I think that it's on a very terrific path right now.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say there was another question about Bangladesh before. But I can answer yours too. But so I think I'm not going to be super innovative. I think like the main thing in reality is sort of better, faster broadband. I think it's critical. I think a lot of the providers we're probably sort of laying our own broadband, our own fiber as well. But I think it's important that the government sort of increases the investment in that area. The other question is about ensuring that you're able to play a role in the region in particular, and then sort of across the world. I think it is about ensuring that cross-data flows are enabled and that sort of privacy and security protections are put in place for that data.
I think we'll close with our neighbor.
Okay, to respond to your question, it's like India. I mentioned that it totally whole country is dependent on the mobile operator still. So the MNCs can take mainly the mobile operator, Grameenphone and Ruby and others can take that lead. But Bangladesh government is now in his 64 districts trying to cover. So this is going on increasing, and we are also fighting for the availability and smoothly using internet in the very remote places, but still it is very scarce in the villages, grassroots levels. Thank you.
So thank you, audience, and thank you, ORF and the organizers for organizing this panel, and thank you, Samir.